This is the first video in a playlist about case analysis of the ethics of artificial intelligence. Okay, in another playlist called What Do We Care About When We Care About Ethics, we arrived at this idea that ethics is really caring about, being concerned about human well-being. And you can break that down even more because well-being is constituted by certain values, these being happiness, autonomy, equality or fairness, trust, and virtue. Those are the things that people really care about, it turns out, when they care about ethics, being a good person, being an ethical person, being concerned with other people. Like they're ultimately concerned with one of those 5 values. There are other values that we have, but they can be described as second-order values, ultimately boiling down to them. And that also gives us an easy way to think about the ethics of artificial intelligence, because you can just say, well, now it's a concern with how AI systems affect human well-being. All right, there are 2 things we can do with those observations. The first thing is that we can say, okay, so we've got AI technologies over here, and we've got the values over here, and so what we need to do is go through systematically and think about all the ways that AI technologies can impact those values. I've tried to do that in another playlist called Ethics and AI, a Survey. And briefly, here's what we came up with, that there's these major moments in artificial intelligence that have a real important impact on ethics and human well-being. We have to think about the data that goes into the models. Once the models are constructed, we have to think about bias and accountability. That's the ethics of machine learning. Reinforcement learning, of course, being a type of machine learning, but a different kind than supervised or unsupervised, so as to need its own bucket. We also have the ethics of prediction, what models are used for, and then issues about what it means to be a person and how those things are affected and changed by digital technology. All right. So that's one way to use those insights. A second way to use the insights is to help us think through particular situations, particular cases that seem to be ethically important. Okay? So understanding these different values give us a way to walk through situations, cases with people involving specific people, specific timelines, specific situations, specific fact patterns, specific technologies, and thinking about, okay, so what is it actually about these cases that's right or wrong, or some kind of mix or right or wrong? That is what the current playlist is dedicated to understanding. I want to step back before we get too far into it and think about what ethical analysis even is and why it's useful. Of course, I do think it's useful, otherwise I wouldn't be making these videos. But analysis is a great word. It's a Greek word. It literally means to break things up. And the reason that you want to break things into pieces is because you want to be able to examine those pieces. Okay? So it's an important pedagogical moment where you can say, okay, so this has different parts to it, and I want to spend time examining each part. That is opposed to synthesis, which is when you're putting all that stuff back together and then making like a holistic kind of judgment. But you need the analysis moment in order to get to the synthesis moment, or at least you should have the analysis moment before you get to the synthesis moment. It's also useful, perhaps, to think about the difference between analysis and intuition, which are, those other concepts are opposed to each other. In a certain way. Okay, so again, analysis, you're breaking things into parts and examining each of those parts. Intuition is when you're just taking the thing as a whole. Like an intuition moment would be like when you hear about some event that happened, some technology, some situation that a person was in, and you think, that's just wrong, that's not right, that is unjust, that's unfair, right? So what's happening there is your moral compass is able to make a judgment about that situation as a whole. There's something about that situation that's just not right. Now, is that okay? It's definitely okay. We all have moral compasses. Hopefully they're pretty good. They've been fashioned by, hopefully some great people and great communities that hopefully you've had the chance to be raised in. And so most of us have pretty good moral compasses. They usually do direct us to the right place, morally speaking. And so that's good. I don't want to change that. Nothing needs to change about that. But we can go beyond it, okay? We can go beyond it. And again, while there's nothing wrong with it, there's often more to the story. You can actually make your insights and judgments more subtle and more effective by going through this analysis stage first, right? Examining the different parts of it. So for example, we're going to use these values to help us think through, like, how does this situation affect autonomy, and in what respect does it affect autonomy? And then you can have a whole conversation about that, and then you have a whole conversation about these other values, and then you can put it together and being like, okay, so here are the specific reasons, right? So we can identify something like as wrong, but maybe you didn't have more words to describe that. Well, if you've done a proper ethical analysis, now when someone says, well, what do you mean it's wrong? What do you mean it's just wrong? What do you mean it's unfair? That now you can go through and say, here are the specific reasons I think it is wrong or unfair or unjust. So, I hope that by the end of this video series, you'll have a much better understanding of how that could work and how ethical case analysis is really important for the ethics of artificial intelligence.